Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Mike Manning to talk about his latest movie, The Way Out. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get to The Way Out, I always like to ask people in like the creative arts to go all the way back to the beginning and kind of when did you know you wanted to get into it, and what was that first move from like thought to reality?
Yeah, so with me, I think it was a lot of kids have this. You know, you're 5, 6, 7 years old, and you're watching movies. For me, movies have always been a source of escapism, and I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and I had like a bunch of cousins, and we would watch a Disney movie, and we would act it out, or we would grab hiking sticks and tie banners around our, handkerchiefs around our head, and go on adventures, Goonie style. And we'd always kind of use our imaginations, and I had a very active imagination as a kid. It kind of got me in trouble sometimes in school because I wouldn't really pay attention. But and I think I just never grew out of that. Uh, I learned how to train myself, to pay attention in school, and then in high school, I did a lot of theater, but for me, acting was always a hobby because I didn't have any professional actors in my orbit. I just didn't know that it was even possible to make a living as a professional actor. So for me, it was something that I did for fun to sort of keep my sanity while I would do homework, or while I would, in college, I went to school for business, and I was doing acting things on the side, but it was always something that I did for my heart and my soul, not something I would make a living doing. And then randomly one day, my best friend in college, we're studying for a business test, and he says, "Hey, Mike, you do acting stuff, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Hey, come to an audition with me. It's an open casting call for a reality show called Real World." And I said, "What's Real World?" I used to live under a rock. And so I said, "What's Real World?" And he said, "Just come to the audition with me." So I went with him, and I ended up getting cast on the show. And fast forward, that show's airing. I am still in Colorado, still in school. I had a manager in Los Angeles reach out to me and say, "Hey, Mike, I saw you on the show. You have a good look. Uh, you should move out to LA and give it 6 months, and I'll make you a star, kid." And that was over a decade ago.
Awesome. So he kept to his word, I'm guessing.
Oh no, he was awful, but
Oh,
um, but it, but
okay.
it, but it got me out here. Yeah,
Yeah, usually those cold call off a reality show manager stories that I've heard don't usually go so well.
yeah, yeah. The one thing I'll say is, what I feel like that experience is it was the universe picking me up and putting me back on the train track that I was supposed to be on.
Mhm.
Because immediately I moved to Los Angeles. I step off the plane, and I feel like, metaphorically, I think, yeah, I actually packed up my car and I drove here, so there was no plane. Whatever. I got here, and I just looked around, and I felt immediately like I was at home. I know growing up in Colorado, there were times where I felt claustrophobic, I felt misunderstood, and I've never felt like that in Los Angeles.
That's awesome. It's even though that agent didn't work out, it like you said, it got you there, so that's cool. It's
Yeah,
always interesting to hear the stories about the people who, because it seems like the stories are like two extremes where you were not in an industry town, not from an industry family, and just kind of found your way there like it was inevitable. And there's other people who are like, well, it was never a second thought because my father worked in this and my mother was a set dresser and my grandma was an
yeah.
actress. And
Yeah, there was no, that, like, the nepo baby trend going on right now. There's no nepotism whatsoever with me. I knew one person when I moved here, and that was it. And I just started building my resume and building my contacts, and uh, here I am.
that's awesome. Was it hard to go from kind of your first, I guess I would say it's your start. I mean, maybe you could correct me on that. Was Real World, um, was it hard to go from like a reality show to a more scripted thing or to get into movies? Like, did casting agents see you one way?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So at that point, I went from being sort of average Joe in Colorado to overnight being on Real World, and everybody knew me. Everybody wanted to be my friend. People were offering me, "Hey, Mike, show up at this club, and we'll pay you, and we'll give you bottle service, and hey, we'll pick you up in this limo, and hey, we'll do this." And I was flying all over the country just to as a special guest for these things. So I sort of, and I was really, really young, and so I went from it kind of went to my head a little bit. And I was like, wow, like I'm a badass. This is awesome. And as we all know, and I came to find out, that lasts for about 6 months, and then nobody cares.
Hmm.
And so, I had moved to Los Angeles, and that was right at the sort of the end of those 6 months, and nobody cared. And I learned very quickly that at that time, it's a little different nowadays, I think, but at that time there was a stigma around reality TV. So you were either a reality TV person or you were a professional actor. And
Hmm.
so I would say for the first 3 or 4 years I was in Los Angeles, I didn't mention Real World to anybody. I didn't have it on my social media pages. I didn't have it. It wasn't on my resume, and I almost tried to hide it from casting directors because I didn't want them. I wanted them to take me seriously as an actor. I didn't want them to think of me as a reality TV person. Now that I've sort of established myself in the industry and I have a bunch of credits and I have other things to talk about, now I've sort of reevaluated my origin story these last couple of years, and I'm like, wow, that's actually a kind of a cool thing that happened to me that doesn't really happen to many people. So now it's sort of come around, and it's like my hero or villain origin story, whatever, however, whoever I am that day. But yeah, in the beginning, I definitely tried to shy away from that.
Yeah, it's funny that you're bringing it up because thinking back now, like the Real World was one of the biggest things going. It was insane, and there was that kind of thing. Now that you're bringing it up, that I can remember hearing, where it's not like actors, it's people on reality TV. But now the Real World is kind of like in a reboot, like this nostalgia hit is probably like kind of like a mini wave you're riding.
Yeah, well, and also the reality TV in general. Now you have at that point the only public figures. I think this is right before Kardashians or right on the cusp. My season aired at the same time as Jersey Shore, so
Okay.
that sort of it put a bad light on reality TV, in my opinion,
Yeah, they
in
didn't do you any
general.
favors.
Yeah, they didn't do me any favors. So I think at that point, reality TV was looked down upon. But nowadays, Chris Hemsworth just did an unscripted show about pushing the limits of humanity, and Zach Efron just had his unscripted show. Like movie stars are doing unscripted now, and so I think that there's because of that, there's a less of a stigma around unscripted TV.
For sure, it does seem like it's more common than not. And part of it's probably like the fun of kind of going without a net, a safety net. And the other part
And
is, I guess it's cheaper to produce.
And also younger audiences, yeah, cheaper to produce. Also younger audiences, they want to connect with people in a real way. You don't have these movie stars that are living behind the curtain that are trying to keep every aspect of their lives a secret. You have younger stars coming out, and most of them are okay with sharing little bits and pieces of their lives, and also because fans want that. They're used to like YouTube and influencers and Vine and TikTok and everything else where people are sharing little bits of their lives, not everything, but and they almost demand that uh, with the people that they choose to be fans of. So it's sort of changed for a lot of reasons, I think.
Have you found that something you have to really keep up with is in the time Real was on, was it like MySpace was probably the only social media going?
It was a little after MySpace, so
Okay.
I did have because Real World's been on since 1992. My season aired in 2010, so
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
yeah, so I was it was later on for me. Um, and so I had Facebook. Uh, I think I had just started Instagram, or maybe if a couple years after that, I had just started Instagram. So it was right on the cusp of really when social media started taking off.
So that's something that you've been like kind of keeping up with and making yourself the brand basically.
Yeah, I mean, I love connecting with people in a real way that have either seen my work or saw me on Real World and connected with my story and sort of that helped inspire them in some way. Like I love hearing those stories and it makes me feel really good. And I try to use social media to connect with people and to share what I'm up to. But I really hate some aspects of social media where it's like oversharing and people that just post everything they do and everywhere they go. And it's like, come on, like, people don't need to see every little aspect of your life. Like I like to keep some of my private life private,
Yeah.
because that is out of respect to my friends and my family and people that are really close to me. I want them to be able to be close to me without having to expose themselves too, because that's I signed up for it. I went into this industry knowing what I was getting into. They didn't really do that. So I it's sort of that balance of what you share and what you keep to yourself.
I'd also imagine as an actor, your job is to be somebody else. And then on social media, you have to be a version of yourself. So you probably need that time to just actually be yourself for real, unguarded.
Correct. Yeah, yeah. And I'm much more comfortable being playing a character in front of a public audience than being myself.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all are to a certain extent, but I love showing people different sides of me, and that's why with this film, with The Way Out, I took the film because it was different than any role that I had played before, and it sort of scared me. And I gained 13 pounds for the role. I trained with boxing classes for 3 months leading up to production, and I really wanted to push myself as far as I could go for this character, and that to me is more fun and more exciting to share with a public audience than, hey guys, this is what Mike ate for breakfast today.
Yeah. Get a little deeper.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, speaking of The Way Out, how did that come across your desk? Because I talked to Barry earlier this week,
Hmm.
the director for people just listening. Um, and I don't remember exactly how it went, but from his perspective, you weren't like, I need this role immediately. Am I getting this wrong?
Yeah, no, the role sort of scared me. I found the script through a friend of mine, Nick Thurr, who's a producer on this film, The Way Out. He and I worked together on a film called Slapface, that we shot back in 2019, and that film did really well. It was a really great experience, and I had produced that film as well. And so he and I were looking for a project to do together, and he brought this script to me, and at first I was like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I'm really really busy. Here are some of my notes on the script, and good luck. I wish you well." And he came back to me a couple months later, and he and Barry had worked on the script, and Barry, like you said, is the writer director, and so they brought it back to me, and it was much closer to what I thought would make a great movie. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Okay, cool. Like I'm interested in being involved. And then Barry calls me a couple weeks later, and he said, "Hey Mike, I've been thinking about it, and I really see you as Shane. What do you think?" And I was like, "Wow, Barry, that's let me think about it," because the role of Shane, as people will see when they see the movie, is very intense, very extreme, very violent, he's emotionally scarred and hurt, and that's a hard character to play and to live in when you're filming something like this. And also the story is close to Barry's. This what happens in this film, some of it is loosely based on Barry's life. And I asked him, and he said I could say this, but some of the things in this movie, with the abuse and with the alcoholism and some of the more serious things that happen in the movie actually happened in some way to Barry. And in this film, Shane, my character, is essentially playing what Barry and a lot of people that have experienced this abuse, sort of what they wish they could have done to take control of their lives and to get revenge and to fight back and to stand up for themselves and all these things. And so there's a lot of pressure to do it the right way. It's not just a bubblegum film where I'm showing up and smiling and, kissing somebody and walking away. It's not this like Hallmark movie kind of thing. And so I thought about it, and I told Barry, I said, "Hey Barry, if I say yes to this, we have to take it to the extreme and we have to push ourselves, because we have to do this type of story justice for everybody that's watching that can relate to this film." And he said, "Deal." I said, "Okay." And then the next day I signed up for classes, and I gained 13 pounds. I started changing my diet, working out a bunch, and because I think the physical aspect of this character is so important,
Mhm.
and that was it.
That's awesome. Yeah, the physical aspect, like you said, especially compared to the co-lead, who was obviously cast to be insubstantial, might be a good word for it. Like he was
Well,
just kind of like meek and scared, and
yeah, I think he was meek and scared, and that is a natural reaction to uh, some things that happen to us in our lives when we're abused, either physically or mentally or whatever. And there are many different types of abuse, right? So, in my and Johnny Bouchamp was just so amazing to work with. He's such a great actor. Um, he what I the way I see it is our both of our characters, he plays Alex, I play Shane. Both of our characters experienced abuse when we were children, and then at some point in our lives there was a fork in the road. And Johnny's character went one way and my character went another way. And the way I see it is, to cope with that abuse, Johnny's character hurts himself. He turns to alcohol and drugs and being insecure and not standing up for himself and everything else. He hurts himself. My character, Shane, hurts the world. He hurts everybody else. He trains, he fights, he's aggressive, he leads with his fists, and he hurts whomever he thinks deserves it, as his way of like a cathartic fighting back, getting over his own wounds kind of feeling. So he hurts the world, Johnny hurts himself. And so it was just this nice parallel. And I think a healthy way to find what Barry says is the way out, is somewhere in between. Is
mhm.
somebody that works on themselves and takes those steps to heal and doesn't turn to drugs and alcohol and everything else, but also clearly somebody that doesn't fight back to the same extreme that my character Shane does.
Yeah, that's
That's
a perfect way to sum up the movie, really. Which you made it so obviously, but I do love the parallel between the two characters, and like you said, the meeting in the middle. Because even knowing that Shane is, for the lack of a better term, kind of the bad guy of the movie,
mhm.
um, he's still magnetic. Like you're still drawn to him, and you get it. Like maybe you don't agree. Like hopefully people aren't like, oh, that's what I'm gonna do. But you understand it, which I think is awesome. And there
Mhm.
are times where Alex is getting a legitimate benefit from this other guy, even if he is manipulative in a lot of ways and just broken himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Hurt people, right? And
Mhm.
so he is broken and he is doing a lot of these things because of the damage he's faced, but he also genuinely is trying to take Alex under his wing and help him out because he sees himself in Alex. And so it's exactly right that we have that dynamic in there. And and if he were less extreme, they probably would have ended up being great friends. But instead, Alex starts to pull away, and then Shane starts to panic and starts to manipulate him, whether it's with words or with sexuality or with anything else. Shane is somebody that uses every tool at his disposal to get what he wants because that is how he has been a survivor his entire life. He was forced to be that way, and then you sort of get the crazy dynamic that happens later on in the film where one character is trying to do one thing and one character is trying to stop them.
Yeah. Was there any collaboration between you and, I'm sorry, was his name John, your co-lead who played Alex?
Johnny, yeah.
Johnny. Was there any collaboration on like when you had a scene together, say, because like you said, that fork in the road, but at one point you were on the same path where you said, oh, you're gonna play it like that, then I can do this off of you, or I'm gonna do this, you could try doing that off of me.
Yeah, so Johnny and I wanted to keep it fresh as much as possible, so we didn't really plan it out. Of course, with some of the fight scenes, fight choreography is almost like a dance, right? So you do one thing, another character does another thing, another character, in order for it to be safe but also look good. And so our stunt double on this movie was Mac Kerr, and he's awesome. I also worked with him on Slapface. He is Keanu Reeves' stunt double for all the John Wick movies. So
Oh,
he definitely knows fight choreography. So he
yeah.
was there. He was there to keep it exciting, but also to make us feel safe the entire time. And so with that safety, we were able to really go for it. And those some of those more intense moments. And then Johnny was game from the very beginning to sort of build that chemistry with me and build that relationship. I remember before we started filming, Johnny and I would go to the gym together, and it was funny because at the gym, I would be like pushing him, sort of like Shane pushes him in the movie. I'm like, Johnny, lift more, do this. I would correct his form, and so immediately before we started filming, we were already sort of building that relationship and building that the sort of the dynamics of me training him to be better and pushing him physically. And to Johnny's credit, he was down to do that every time, and he's like, okay, let's rehearse this, let's do this, let's talk about this scene, because he also uh, realized how important that dynamic was for these two characters, and the movie lives and dies between the push pull tug of war nature of these two characters. Because if Johnny doesn't bring one extreme and I don't bring the other, then that electricity doesn't really work.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, because it's not like Alex is the main character and Shane's the supporting or the other way around. You're both equally there. It's almost like with a couple small rewrites, it literally could be the same character, like Fight Club style, where Shane lives in Alex's head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, David Fincher is one of my favorite directors, and that was another way that Barry sort of got me to do this. Is I was like, so Barry, what's the style that you're seeing for this movie? And he goes, oh yeah, I want it to be really dark and gritty and kind of like Fight Club. And my ears perked up, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, great, let's do it.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, I made the comparison with the characters. I mean, that's not the way it went, but
Hmm.
yeah, even the whole look of it is very Fincher-esque. That's awesome.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
So for the fight choreography scenes that you mentioned, because like you did a lot of boxing, Barry was very complimentary of your boxing. You said you got like real legit good, which is awesome. Probably really fun to do. Um, but the fighting was important for the movie, but not just because it's an action scene, but it was very metaphorical of the internal struggles. Have you done choreography like that before? And if so, was it different because this was like more of a mental battle, even though it's coming out physically?
Wow, great question. So yes to all those things.
Sorry, I
I
threw a
had
lot at you.
Yeah, no worries. So I had done fight choreography before. I had a pretty intense fight scene on another MTV show called Teen Wolf. So I was in the final season of Teen Wolf, and I had this fight scene in a jail cell, and had a bunch of I that was with oh my Lyndon Ashby, who, fun fact, played Johnny Cage in the original Mortal Kombat movies, and which I loved the those movies. And so the whole time I'm doing this fight scene with Lyndon, I'm thinking, wow, Johnny Cage is kicking my ass right now. This is awesome. But there have been a handful of times where I've done fight choreography, so I was pretty comfortable with that. And again, Mac, Kerr, our stunt coordinator, made us feel comfortable every time. But but yeah, the intensity. Uh, I'm sorry, what was the first part of the question?
Yeah, sorry, I kind of threw like a thousand things at
Yeah,
you.
no worries, no worries.
Was this fight choreography different than like the Teen Wolf jail cell fighting thing? Very
Mhm.
much for the action. I mean, I'm sure it had a story point,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah.
but this was so deep.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a very physical actor, and the more I can do physically, whether it's giving myself something to do in the scene or focusing on something physical, that helps me sort of stay out of my head. And so I always try to have a physical aspect to something I'm doing. And this movie, I was really grateful for exactly what you said, for the whether it be the fight choreography or even the boxing training, just like boxing while we have some of these longer monologues. Because if it were just me, a lot of this movie is just me sort of like spitting orders, like barking orders at him, and talking to him about life philosophy and everything else. And if we didn't have that boxing element, it might be sort of a boring scene, because nobody wants to just I would feel like a drill sergeant, and that would be a good chunk of the movie. So having the boxing element in there really, kept the energy, and it also gave us something to focus on other than just the words and and hitting the beats. And then the fight choreography and the fight scenes, exactly what you're saying. So the emotion behind those really, it was nice to have that emotion sort of take over our bodies and have that be part of the fighting. To your point, it wasn't just about the fighting, it was about these two characters and their internal struggle. And the fight choreography sort of symbolized what is going on the inside, in addition to the words that are coming out of their mouths. And so I think that it really allowed us to access a different aspect of that hurt and that emotion and that angst and that anger, and sort of being uh there was a sadness in them. Like all hurt and anger comes from a place of pain. And so you really saw that with both characters. And the fighting allowed us to sort of take that to the next level.
Yeah, that is cool. Getting the emotion into it because that what's the emotion creates emotion or something like that.
Yeah,
That's a good
exactly.
point
Yeah.
because that scene, the last fight in the garage, the big fight between the two characters, that could
hmm
have been you two sitting across the table, mentally, yelling at each other back and forth, like you said. But that's not as interesting to watch as
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, and also that allowed me to show audiences the crazy, with my character. I think that there is an element of craziness to Shane where he's sort of unhinged, and in his life, because of his survival instincts, you're either with him or you're against him. And for a good chunk of the movie, he tries to take Alex under his wing and say, okay, I'm going to mold you, I'm going to help you, I'm going to help you get through the pain that you have, because I see myself in you, I've been where you have been, let me help you. And Alex is on his team. And then there's a switch in the movie where I think Alex says that he's going to call the police, and in Shane's mind, that is when Shane says, okay, you are no longer with me, you are now against me, and I'm going to do everything in my power uh, to break you and to show you that you are wrong, because that is how Shane deals with things in his life. He's the only person that he's been able to count on, and you're either with him or you're against him. So when that shift happens, Shane then goes on the extreme and decides to disassemble Alex's life one thing at a time, one person at a time, with violence and with hurting those around him that really do love Alex, um, because that's the only type of revenge that Shane knows.
Mhm. I thought that part of the switch was so well done because when Shane is trying to distance Alex from somebody else important in Alex's life who has his best interest in mind, all the stuff Shane is saying makes the audience pause and say, like, maybe he's right about this. Like maybe this
Yeah,
other person doesn't have his best interest in mind and Shane does. Like it was just so well done and so balanced across the board. It was great.
thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And I think too, in movies, I almost don't want to call Shane the villain, because he's just doing the best he can the way he knows how.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that you said, at the end of the movie, and this is what I told Barry. I said, Barry, we are going to take this to the extreme. At the end of the movie, I just want audiences to understand why Shane is the way he is and why he does what he does. And to your point, everything that Shane said to Alex, he truly believed.
Yeah.
He wasn't just saying it to say it. He truly thought that he was helping Alex, and those are the scariest types of villains. You look at Thanos in these Marvel movies, and the reason that he's scary is because in his heart he truly believes he's doing the right thing, and a lot of what he's saying the audience can relate to, even
Yeah.
though he's going to snap his fingers and disappear half the planet. Like, people are like, wow, he might have a point. Maybe, we are destroying the world, and maybe we are doing this, maybe we are doing that. And I think those are the most interesting types of villains, because those are the villains that you can see the humanity within them, and you kind of get it. And there's a tiny, of course, so many things of what Shane does in this movie are bad, awful things, and I
Mhm.
don't think anybody should do them. But there's a tiny little piece that I hope the audience can relate to and say, well, he kind of has a point there,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah.
I would imagine, especially people who had a past even close to what was represented that, Barry got into and things like that.
Yeah.
Anyone who was in that had to have thoughts of Shane at some point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's tough, and unfortunately, abuse happens to people, physical abuse, mental abuse, and we premiered this film at the Burbank Film Festival, and then we screened at some other festivals, and it was great. I mean, the reaction was fantastic. We ended up
Awesome.
winning the Audience Award, Best LGBT Feature Film, and at that screening and at another screening in San Diego, people would come up to us after the screening and say, "Hey, without getting too much into it, they would say, "Hey, like, thank you guys for making this film. I myself have experienced abuse like this, and it's really nice to see that story told in a genre like horror that isn't necessarily as triggering, but it's still nice to see that story is being told and that other people have experienced that and I'm not alone in my suffering and in my grief. I think that's something beautiful about the horror genre in general. I think the horror genre allows filmmakers to explore the darkest sides of humanity and themes like abuse and revenge and everything else, but in a way that is still within the swimming pool and or the sandbox or whatever of that escapism. So you're playing in that world and you're hitting on these things and these themes and you're talking about it, you're having that conversation, but it's in the world of a horror film. And so it's not so real and so close to home that people that have experienced something like that can't watch it.
I think that's a really important thing to bring up because I've talked about this movie to a few of my like other movie friends too, saying, keep an eye out for it. Um, but it is something because when they ask what it's about and you say, oh, these people dealing with trauma and they kind of take different paths and do it in different ways because you don't want to give anything away that takes the fun
Yeah.
out of it. But the fact that, like you were just saying, it goes into a horror thriller kind of thing, it makes the real world horror a lot easier to take in the context of the out in your face horror.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think this movie is just as much escapism as it is a cautionary tale.
Mhm.
In the film, Johnny's character Alex, he turns to alcohol and abuse, and that is a cautionary tale of what not to do when you're experiencing something like this. What you do is you turn to people that you love and support you, and you talk to people, and you go to support groups if needed or whatever. So you don't sort of go down that path. And also, outside of the movie, I think Barry's story is a success story because he is Barry from Barry's Boot Camp, the popular gym franchise. Like he turned his life around and he took what he loved in terms of fitness and helping people in their own health on their own health journey, and then he took that and began a successful business. Barry is very much a success story. He's somebody that may have experienced some awful things as a child, but he went on to create a very successful business. Now he's writing and directing his own films, and he's just a wonderful person. So I think however much the film is a cautionary tale, Barry's real life story is a success story, and that's what one of the other aspects I think that makes this film special.
Absolutely, yeah, because it does end on a very hopeful note.
Absolutely, and we did that on purpose.
Yeah.
It's a hopeful note for in some aspects, but then it's also um, we leave it open for a sequel. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's true, yeah.
Yeah.
If there is sequel talk, are you on board?
Oh yeah. It was a really fun. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to give away any spoilers, but it was. I would definitely be interested in some aspect of a sequel.
Yeah, I guess my question was a bit of a spoiler in
Ah,
itself.
no worries.
Awesome. Well, Mike, I know we're a little bit over time, but I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk about this movie. I thought the movie was fantastic. Everyone should check it out. And your character was my favorite part about it. So it's awesome I got to sit down and talk to you about it.
Adam, thank you so much, man. This has been great, and I love the movie, so it's easy to sort of talk about and try to, and hopefully people will go see it and have the same reaction you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to plug while we're here? Website, social media, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a handful of other films coming out this year, and so if people want to follow that, it's my website is just mikemanning.info, or I'm just Mike Manning on social media. I think there's like some underscores on Instagram, but if you just type in my name, I'm the first one that pops up.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thanks again. And look forward to seeing your next movie.
All right, thanks, Adam. Have a good one.
You too. I'd like to thank Mike one more time for taking time out of his obviously busy schedule to come on the show and talk to me about his career, his journey, the mental space to get in to do a movie like The Way Out, and of course The Way Out itself. You might be tired of me saying it by now, but I really did love this movie. It's not just one of the best indies I've seen in a long time, it's one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. It's a great way to start off 2023, kicking off with great content, great recommendations. And Mike's character and Mike's performance was my favorite part about it. So that made it even cooler to be able to sit down and talk to somebody so talented. Please make sure you like, subscribe, bell, do all those things. We got a lot more interviews, new movie coverage, screener coverage. Amazon screeners are coming back in. They seem to come in waves. All that stuff coming your way. You're not going to want to miss out. Also, make sure you listen to So Is Your Podcast every single week, wherever you get your podcasts. SoIsYourPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, videos, merchandise, and more. So Is Your Podcast can also be found on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You get multiple monthly bonus shows, audio, and video. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series. It's called Social Studies. It's a coming of age story about a group of friends navigating the perils of high school, all the ridiculous that goes around with it. We heighten everything, we turn everything way up. It is semi-autobiographical in some ways. It's a part wish fulfillment in some ways, and also kind of something we would love to tell our 14-year-old selves. We write it like a sitcom, and we approach it as if we were making our own version of a Nicktoon, the cartoons that we grew up on, we love and inspired us. You can find all of our available issues at socialstudiescomic.com, on Global Comics and Comixology, and we got more issues on the way, so stay plugged into that as well. Thanks.